Okay. Hey everyone, welcome to our Shelter-in-Place live stream edition today. Oh, are we not streaming live yet? There we go. Hey everybody, welcome to an impromptu live stream today. I was not horribly prepared. I was actually going to skip today, but a bunch of people asked me to go ahead and do it anyway, so here we are. Let's make sure that everything is working here, because it just occurred to me that I might not have actually checked all of my settings before we went live, so I apologize for that in advance. Nope, looks like everything's fine. So there we go. Let's dive into the giveaways. We will be doing all of our giveaways on Wednesday. Let me get the date right here so everybody knows. Wednesday the 13th is when we will be drawing all the names out of a hat for our giveaway items. And let's go through those real quick here. We'll zoom this out to my entire crazy space here so you can see all of the secrets. We have a bunch of different things here. We have jackets. We have two sort of lightweight ski jackets. This one is from Volkswagen. We also have one from Toyota. We have a bunch of different thermoses. These seem to collect incredibly quickly for some reason. I'm not quite clear where they all come from. This one is featuring Infinity and Spaceport America. If you want to be entered into any of these, you just send an email to itsaconspiracy@alexonautos.com and make sure that you send us your address and a name. It has to be a U.S. Postal Service deliverable address in the United States only. So sorry for everybody that is out of the U.S. It's just a shipping cost thing. So we have another thermos here. This one is a Toyota GR Supra thermos. We've given some of these away before. I don't think I have another one here at the moment, but GR Supra thermos right there. This one's a 24-ounce model. And a separate item for the lucky Supra fan out there, we have a GR Supra color book, which is kind of an interesting thing that they sent here. I gather that this is a limited edition book that will be given to purchasers of the first edition Supra, I think is who this was going to. I'm not sure if it's available outside of that, but we have a copy, and that copy could be yours. We have headphones. We have all sorts of thermoses. Again, these are Porsche thermoses. There's some Thermo Fisher Scientific thermoses there, not overly car related. There's a Genesis glass flask. That's kind of an interesting twist. If anybody is so interested, there is a Toyota coloring book and Toyota playing cards. A lot from Toyota this time. We have a Ram thermos, a Mustang Mach-E thermos. This one has a Texas logo on the back there. We also have, we actually have two of those Ram thermoses. We have a Hyundai coffee mug right there. Hopefully you can still hear me. A small cutting board from something or another. We have lots of hats, Honda hats. Looks like a lot of Honda hats, actually. 3 Honda hats and a Jeep hat, all hanging out here. And there is a little electric pony if you are a Mustang Mach-E fan. And I believe that is it for now. So there you are. And there will also be some of these Alex Autos t-shirts available as well. So be sure and get your name in the hat. And we'll be doing that drawing very soon. Again, next Wednesday. And that will probably be happening at 12 p.m. Pacific time. We'll have an official reminder on the channel, so you should check back and make sure that you have your notifications turned on. And while I'm reminding everybody that, make sure you have your notifications turned on in general, obviously, otherwise you won't be notified that our videos are out. So, let's move along with everything out of the way. I'm sure I've probably forgotten something. There may be more at the giveaway. Let's see what's in the box here. Oh, these are membership things. So if you decide to join Alex and Autos, it's a way to help support us here. We've moved away from Patreon because Patreon's kind of a pain in the rump, honestly. So we've moved to the YouTube join membership feature. You will get a little Alex and Autos lapel pin. I will zoom in on that so you can see what those look like right there. It's an Alex and Autos lapel pin. You will also get some stickers, etc., some slightly snazzier stickers. And then, of course, there is the free sticker giveaway, so you can mail us down there at the bottom. If you have requested stickers over the last about month or so, please note that those stickers will be delayed because of the whole COVID-19 shutdown thing. I haven't been able to venture to the post office box where all that mail goes to collect everything and get those stickers out. So fear not, they're coming. They just may be a little bit delayed. So with that out of the way, let's go right into the questions. And actually, before I do that, I wanted to thank everybody. We put up the link to Feeding America, to donate to Feeding America on 44 of our videos, and that has garnered $780 for Feeding America, so I wanted to thank everybody for that. And then, if you recall, we recently did a live show where we did a Feeding America benefit drive. That resulted in us sending Feeding America a check for $1,050. We matched everything that was donated for that live stream, so thanks to everybody for your generous donations there. So keep that up, of course. You can see those buttons down there, I believe, at the bottom of this video. If not, you'll see it at the bottom of our regular videos right next to the join and membership buttons and all those other various buttons down there. There's also some new merch down there if you are interested. And one of the new merch items is I prefer amber turn signals. So that was something that a bunch of you had recommended that we do. So we have created a design just for you. If you click on over to the Teespring merch store and then hunt around, you'll see that down there in some of those new items. Moving along here, James is asking if I lost weight. I don't think so, but that would be lovely if I did. So we'll see. First questions first. Have we ever worked with Doug DeMuro? Oddly enough, I've never done a video with Doug DeMuro, but we worked quasi together at thetruthaboutcars.com when we were both over there. So I do know of him. We've ended up at the same events quite frequently. Let me adjust the volume here. I've heard someone complaining. So there we go. Moving along here. What do we think of the new Toyota Highlander? We actually have a video coming up soon on the Highlander Hybrid, so be sure and stay tuned for that. I like the Highlander overall. I like the fact that Toyota decided to go a little bit outside their box, and they're creating a very efficient hybrid system, which wasn't really where the Highlander Hybrid was before. And I think that's more of a compelling reason to buy the Highlander Hybrid now over something like a minivan hybrid. With the previous generation, to be perfectly honest, it was really heavy, and it didn't really handle much better than the Chrysler Pacifica Hybrid. It wasn't that much more efficient than the Pacifica Hybrid, and it had no EV range. So in a very pragmatic world, I probably would have bought a hybrid minivan if I needed a 3-row hybrid thing. But now I think there's a great reason to buy the Highlander Hybrid. It performs well. They've really solved the efficiency problem with their new drivetrain, their new much more fuel-efficient 4-cylinder engine. Overall performance was really pretty impressive for that hybrid system. So I would say if you're looking for a hybrid, that is definitely a great option out there right now. But I would also say that if you are not looking for a hybrid and you're looking at the regular versions of the Highlander, then there are some pretty stiff competitors in the segment at the moment. The Highlander's key selling point is that it's not terribly big on the outside, and unfortunately, as a result, it's not terribly big on the inside. So if you want a roomy 3-row crossover with a lot of 3rd-row room and reasonable cargo room behind the 3rd row, it's just not going to be the Highlander. That's just not its shtick. I'm not entirely clear why Toyota has resisted producing a bigger 3-row crossover, since there definitely seems to be a sizable market for that. And I think that's part of the reason that somehow the Highlander has not enjoyed the same sort of sales success in its segment relative to the competition as, for instance, the RAV4. The RAV4 is far and away outselling, for instance, the Ford Escape. But interestingly enough, in the 3-row segment, the Ford Explorer, which is roomier on the inside, has been outselling the Highlander for quite some time. And I don't expect that to change with the new Highlander. The Highlander, the Pilot, and the Sorento are the 3 entries that are on the smaller end of the segment, and it looks like Pilot is probably going to stay about the same size. That's the rumor mill that we've been hearing. Highlander obviously has stayed the same size, and the rumor mill is also telling us that Sorento is going to keep the 3rd row and stay about that same size. But you take a look at the Hyundai Kia lineup, and they decided to make a bigger one, which is the Telluride. And if you want that roominess, then the Telluride, the Pathfinder, the Atlas, etc., those are going to be the roomier entries in that group. So moving along here, let's see here. What do you think Honda can do to improve highway efficiency in their hybrids? I would argue that, this is a good question, by the way. I would argue that Honda's highway fuel efficiency is hampered by their single speed setup. So I would argue that if Honda had a 2-speed transmission basically after their hybrid system, that would improve overall highway fuel economy. So the way that Honda does this is the mechanical linkage between the engine and the single speed reduction gear will engage at about 45 to 42 miles an hour depending on the version of the vehicle. And so this is sort of like having only 5th gear in a manual transmission car. So everything below that is hybrid. Once you've reached this magic speed, you can engage 5th gear, say. But if you've driven an older transmission, or actually perhaps even the best corollary here would be a modern 6-speed automatic, a modern 6-speed manual rather, you'll know that out on the highway, 5th gear can be kind of high. And sometimes you want 6th gear, or if you're driving a very, very modern manual, you'll want 7th gear. And fuel economy is one of the big downsides to that single speed set. So if you're going 55 or 60 miles an hour, it is targeted at those speeds. But if you're going 75, 80, 85 miles an hour, which you can legally do in Texas, then you are definitely going to be getting lower fuel economy than in basically any of the other competitive hybrid systems. So I hope that they address that. Honda argues that for average real-world drivers, it doesn't make too much of a difference, but I don't know any review outlet that has ever achieved Toyota beating fuel economy in the Honda hybrid. It just doesn't seem to happen, regardless of the rating. So, Clarity, a Honda Accord hybrid versus Camry hybrid, Clarity hybrid versus whatever you want to compare that to, Insight versus Corolla hybrid or Insight versus Prius, etc. None of the Honda hybrids really achieve that lofty fuel economy goal unless you're being pretty gentle on the hybrid system. Now, if you are being really gentle on the hybrid system, then they can deliver excellent fuel economy. I've had no problem, for instance, in the Honda Accord hybrid in the very first generation, getting 50, 55, even 60 miles an hour, as long as you keep speeds to about 60 miles an hour. But that is the tricky bit. Let's see here, moving along here. TLX versus IS350 F Sport. Oh, that's kind of an interesting pair up there. I would probably go for the Lexus IS because of its driving nature. Remember that they're not the same size vehicle, though. The IS is approximately ILX sized in the Acura lineup, and the TLX is more Lexus GS or ES sized, approximately. The TLX is going to have a lot more interior room, so if you are interested in using the back seat, I would definitely go with the Acura. But if you're interested in driving feel, handling ability, etc., if you want that rear-wheel drive dynamic, then obviously you're only going to find that in the Lexus IS. The TLX does have a great all-wheel drive system, but it's simply not a substitute for a true rear-wheel drive vehicle. So moving along here, can you justify a 2020 Bolt over a Tesla? Sure, that's easy to justify. It's price. It's interesting. Sophie and Bay over at Redline Reviews, who's a good friend of mine, recently had a Bolt. And he was having this particular quandary, I would say. And I kept reminding him that the Bolt is going to have a lot more cash on the hood. So that's going to be the big thing. If you want an EV now, neither of these vehicles has a federal tax credit, mind you. But the Bolt is going to be giving you better range in base form than the absolute base Tesla Model 3. And it will be doing it with less money outlay. You're also going to be getting the ability to do General Motors financing. So GM has an in-house finance arm that can give you much better deals than the financing that we see over at Tesla available. So if you want 0% interest for a bazillion years, that's exactly where you're going to get it. GM has a long history of great batteries too. So battery warranty, battery reliability, battery longevity is going to be excellent in the Bolt. I have no reason to doubt that at all. Generally speaking, fit and finish, product quality, assembly quality is considered to be above Tesla as well. The downside, of course, to the Chevy Bolt is that I found it terribly uncomfortable, and I have yet to actually find anybody that thinks that the Bolt is an overtly comfortable car. The driver's seat is just not well shaped for anybody with my frame size. I'm not a very broad-shouldered person, mind you, but the seat in the Bolt kind of hit me sort of here, right between the shoulder blades. I found it horribly uncomfortable up front. You're also not going to have the snazzy infotainment screen. You're not going to have a Tesla logo on the front. You're not going to have the luxury image and the luxury trappings in a way that you find in the Tesla. Some people think that the Bolt looks funny on the outside. Some people love the look. You know, the looks are more subjective, I would say, in that realm. Obviously, performance is going to be a big deal because the Bolt isn't going to have the same kind of performance as the Tesla. It's going to be easier to service in certain states. So depending on where you live, the Bolt is going to be easier to service. There are a lot of things in the works trying to adjust to the Tesla model over the US, but there are still states in the US where you cannot buy or get a Tesla serviced. Michigan is one of them. Michigan, there seems to be some change happening there, we hope. But at the moment, if you have a Tesla in Michigan and you want to have it serviced, it has to be taken out of state to be serviced and then brought back in, and that's kind of a pain. So all those factors would go together. Now, I would argue that if you are really interested in a Bolt and you don't want to spend the money to get a Tesla, because a Tesla could be 10, 15, 20% more expensive. To some people, that's not a big deal, and then you should buy the Tesla. If that is a big deal, however, and you really want an EV, I might suggest actually looking at one of the manufacturers that still has a tax credit available. If you can find something from really anybody else that still has that tax credit available, and that could make your EV more affordable. There's obviously a logic to the Nissan Leaf. That's not overly one of my favorite vehicles, but there's some logical reasons to buy it over the Volt, or the Bolt rather. Tax credits and tax benefits are one of them. Obviously, the Hyundai and Kia EVs have rated very well, but the big problem with them is that they're not available in every state because battery supplies are severely limited throughout the world. And that's why we still don't have the Kia Soul EV in the US. There just aren't enough batteries to go around. Battery supply and battery production has been a huge stumbling block for EV manufacturers out there. Tesla has a lot of long-term contracts. And so it seems like battery supply issues are a little bit less of a problem for Tesla, but it still is even a problem for them. Ditto for General Motors. They seem to have some good contracts, so it's a little bit less of an issue. Still, there is a supply constraint. And with manufacturers that got in a little bit later, there just aren't enough batteries to go around. So moving on here. Any news from the RAV4 Prime? Unfortunately, no, and that honestly has me a little bit disappointed because I was hoping that by now we would start hearing. I think it's the whole coronavirus shutdown, to be honest. So it looks like the event would have been in the summer, so we would have received an invite by now if they were going to happen. It looks like the launch event's probably not going to happen, but we don't know exactly what will happen, to put it this way. So, for instance, we know that the Supra event should have happened by now, and that's why I have these Supra giveaways here. So instead of having the event, they're just sending us the Supra, and then on next week sometime, we'll actually be able to talk about the Supra. But it should be arriving here really soon, actually. I'm trying to remember exactly when that Supra is going to turn up, but pretty shortly. And it may be the same thing for the RAV4 Prime. We may just end up getting the car and then doing a video on it before it goes on sale. It should be on sale, we're told, by the end of the year, but production could obviously be affected by that. Moving along here. Sorry if the audio and video are kind of mismatched there. This is a problem with YouTube. So, depending on where you are, that could be a problem. Moving along here. When do we think that the Rogue will have the 1.6T or the 2.0 VC as an option? So far, we don't know. The rumor mill out of Nissan is that we will just get an updated version of the drivetrain that it's had previously, so probably a 2.5-liter four-cylinder engine. That's all we seem to really know for sure at the moment. Moving along here. When do you expect Lincoln's version of Sync 4 to come out? I would guess at least a year after the Mach-E is officially released. What we get it in, I'm not sure, but there have been some rumors that Lincoln may get the latest version of Sync with the bigger screen at some point soon. This is Darren's asking, do we expect significant discounts on new models towards the end of 2020? Well, we're already seeing pretty significant discounts, to be perfectly honest, right now, and it's not even the end of 2020. I would say discounts in your area are really going to be highly dependent on how far things were shut down in the COVID shutdown. Here in California, we are definitely seeing some pretty significant discounts on certain vehicles. The problem has been that now we have a supply issue, so this may limit the deal window. I'm sure that some manufacturers will still have deals going, but depending on exactly what's going on, you may end up in a situation where you're hoping for a deal and you're waiting and waiting and waiting, and then the deal doesn't come because now we have a lack of supply. And the rumor mill is telling us that, for instance, Ram and Chevrolet, possibly GMC as well, may actually be running out of stock on trucks on the dealer lot. So since sales have been continuing and at some slow pace, but production has completely stopped, that could be a problem as far as supply goes. So we'll find out. Bri B is asking if Nissan is licensing a 9-speed automatic from Mercedes. That has been the rumor, but it hasn't been confirmed. The tricky bit here is that Nissan has a history of going a little bit odd ratio versus some of the competition. So they had 5-speed, there was a 7-speed obviously, and now we have a 9-speed. So they skipped over the even ratios, 6 and 8, in their rear-wheel drive transmissions. So it is logical that Jatco could have created a transmission design for that. We just don't know, to be perfectly honest. Nissan and Mercedes have had coordinated deals before, so this could be another one of them, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did. We haven't been able to get a good grip on the ratios involved in that transmission. One easy way to tell would be if you take a look at the ratios, first gear through ninth gear, and they're identical or awfully close, or the difference between the ratios spread between 1 and 2 and 2 and 3, etc. If those are equal or approximately the same, there's a good chance that it's a related design. But we asked Nissan for an official comment on this, and they declined to comment. They claimed that it wasn't quite a decline to comment, which would have said yes. It was a Jatco needs to comment on this, but as far as we know, it was internally developed at Jatco, so who knows. Matthew's asking, when will the Highlander hybrid review be ready? That is a good question. Let me take a look here. I think that review may be in the final edit stage. Let's see what we have coming up in the queue. This is a good time to talk about that. So right now, our next video coming up is going to be RAV4 versus Lexus NX. So hybrid on hybrid. Then we will have the Toyota RAV4 TRD off-road. Actually, I'm sorry, that already came out. So the next video after that is going to be RAV4 hybrid, or Highlander hybrid rather. So that should be Wednesday. So next Wednesday, expect that. Then afterwards, we will have Jeep Cherokee. We have the Forte GT, the Gladiator Mojave, Ioniq Maxima, Volvo S60 T8, Yaris hatchback. Then we have Infiniti Q60 Red Sport and Hyundai Venue. We'll also have some super videos here coming very, very soon. So we are waiting for some of the exact details on that. I believe that the Supras were already supposed to be here this morning, but they could be stuck somewhere in Salt Lake City. So hopefully we will get to those as soon as possible. Moving along here to the next question. What is more fun to drive, a Veloster N or a 3.3-liter turbo G70? Well, that's an interesting question. Fun to drive is such a hard to define thing. In high-powered front-wheel drive cars can definitely be fun, but that doesn't necessarily make them handle better. And some purists would say a true front-wheel drive car could never be a driver's car. I don't know if I agree with that necessarily. There's something fun about the slightly rough around the edges eagerness of the Veloster N. That is an awful lot of fun. The G70 is a lot more polished, a lot more Korean BMW, if you like. So that's a tricky one between those two. I think I might have troubles deciding. I also would say that you may want to wait till next year because the G70 is looking like it's going to get a refresh, and it's looking like it's going to be getting the new 2.5 liter and 3.5 liter engines as well. So probably about 400 horsepower on the top end, and at least 270, 280 horsepower at the bottom end, possibly 300, but we'll see exactly what those numbers end up. Let's see here, moving along. Do we think that Kia and Hyundai will adopt dual injection to avoid carbon buildup issues? This is an interesting question. I don't think that we will see that because they don't seem to have as much of an issue with that at all compared to some of the competition. So carbon buildup is a tricky question. In theory, as long as you're not getting a lot of gases coming through the cylinder wall, through the rings into the crankcase, etc., and you're not getting a lot of PCV blow-by, then you don't really have too much of a carbon buildup issue. There can be a little bit of a burp from the cylinder as the valve opens, but generally speaking, that's not where it seems to be coming from. And some engine designs are more plagued with this than others. The bottom line is that carbon buildup is truly a rare issue. It is not as common as some people think, and it does seem to be very engine specific. So not every direct injection engine seems to have this problem, and the Hyundai Kia engines don't seem to have this problem either. The long-term jury is probably still out though. So, we've seen their direct injection engines for a good 5-6 years, so there are definitely a lot of research metrics out there. If we take a look at Consumer Reports, for instance, or JD Power, Consumer Reports doesn't have any major engine issues with those direct injection engines from the Hyundai Kia Motor Group. We also don't see direct injection issues from a number of other manufacturers out there that use just simple single port DI systems. So I don't expect that to change. Let's put it that way. How big of competition will the Sorento hybrid be for the Highlander hybrid? That's an interesting question. I'm going to be intrigued to see how that goes because there is rumored to be not just a hybrid but also a plug-in hybrid, which could give them an angle that Toyota does not have since we don't have a Highlander Prime. Exactly how much competition remains to be seen because we don't know what the fuel economy is going to be on the Sorento hybrid. And it appears that the Sorento hybrid is going to be sportier than the Highlander hybrid. So if they go in that direction, that could make a little bit of sense because it would give the customer an option to go fuel economy with performance rather than straight fuel economy. If performance ends up being pretty similar, but fuel economy isn't where the Highlander hybrid is, then I think it would be an easy win for the Toyota. Let's put it that way. What is the best EV hybrid that isn't a bore to drive? Obviously, the Teslas are going to be there on the EV front. On the hybrid front, I would say any of the Volvo plug-in hybrids are definitely fun to drive. They're odd, they're unusual, I guess would be the right way to say it. They're quirky, but they're definitely fun to drive. Anything that is more performance-focused in the hybrid segment is going to be there. Obviously, Volvo's 400 horsepower hybrid system is the key one there. I would say that Lexus's attempts at hybridization have not been that same level of quirky fun. They're trying, and we are going to be seeing a new higher performance hybrid system out of Lexus over the next probably about 2 years or so. But at the moment, I would say in the hybrid segment outside of exotics. So obviously a Porsche 918 is going to be an awful lot of fun. Obviously the Porsche Taycan is going to be an awful lot of fun as well, but those are much more expensive. So I would say under $60,000, it's going to be Volvo and probably Tesla, I would actually say. I have good hopes for the Polestar 2, but we don't know exactly what that will be like yet. Any of the luxury full EVs are definitely fun. They're not the same level of crazy that we see in Tesla, but obviously the I-Pace, the e-tron, they're definitely solid fun. Let's put it that way. Let's see here. What cars are fast but affordable are your favorites? There are a lot of good, fast and affordable cars out there. I mean, obviously, any of the American pony cars are going to be there. So, Mustangs, Camaros, Challengers are obviously going to be great bang for the buck. A lot of classic fun. If you want finesse, then you want a Mustang, I would argue. If you want crazy amounts of power for not too much cash, that's going to be where Dodge is. They're not going to have the same kind of handling finesse and handling feel that we find in the Mustang, but there are definitely some trade-offs. The Mustang's interior isn't going to be quite as nice. If you can get a good deal on it, I kind of like the Infiniti Q60 is an awful lot of fun as well, especially the 400 horsepower Red Sport version. The Kia Stinger is a good buy in that segment as well. It's really the only rear-wheel drive entry aside from the FCA products. So if you want something that's rear-wheel drive, affordable, fun, and not American, then that your Stinger is about the only option outside of the luxury segment. What we are going to be seeing coming up over the next few years seems to be more of the same. So we don't really seem to see, outside of some possible EVs, we don't seem to see too many fast, fun things in that same segment. We are going to be seeing a hotter hatch version of the Corolla that could be entertaining. There are classics like the Civic Si. The Forte GT is an awful lot of fun. I think if you are looking for bang for the buck and you're wanting not to spend over $30,000, say, then that's really where GTI, GLI, Civic, SI, etc., that's where they all play. Obviously, the Subaru WRX is going to be in there, but I'm not the biggest fan of the WRX. The way that it delivers power and its CVT, it's just not my favorite in that group. So in some ways, I think that the WRX is for the dedicated Subaru WRX all-wheel drive fans that are willing to put up with the CVT. Bearing in mind that most people buy the automatic in this segment, so even among GTI and GLI buyers, the automatic is by far the more popular option. Obviously, Civic Si is manual only, but Civic Si sales would probably quadruple or beyond if they offered an automatic transmission, to be honest. Let's see here, moving on here. What do you think would be the best transmission for Mazda to use? Ooh, I get to pontificate today. I would say that they should be using, in a rational world, they should be using the Aisin 8-speed automatic transmission, the same one that practically everybody else buys. There are certain transmissions that are almost universal in the world, and the Aisin 8-speed and 6-speed front-wheel drive transmissions are ubiquitous, and the ZF 8 and 6-speed rear-wheel drive transmissions are ubiquitous. So Aisin 8-speeds are used in everything from Toyotas to Lexuses, all the front-wheel drive Toyotas, all the front-wheel drive Lexuses, every Volvo manufactured, all the front-wheel drive BMWs, a lot of the Volkswagen Audi group products that are front-wheel drive or transverse engine use the Aisins. If they don't use a DCT, it's going to be an Aisin under the hood. We also see Aisins in the occasional Ford product, the occasional General Motors product, if their transmission isn't ready. Just wide varieties from mainstream to luxury, etc., and everything in between. Very, very durable transmissions and versatile as well. The big reason that I dislike the Mazda 6-speed, the two big reasons I would say, are it doesn't have the ratio spread that we see in the modern 8-speeds. So we don't have the higher gear ratios for better fuel economy, and we don't see the lower gear ratios for improved acceleration versus the competition. And the second thing is weight. The Mazda 6-speed is based on an old Ford design. So even though Mazda says that it's an in-house 6-speed, which is technically true, but the basis of the in-house 6-speed design is, it says that connection was lost here. So pardon me if we actually have a problem here. Oh, nope, still looks like we're there. See, are we back? So I'm sorry if we are having an issue here. I might have accidentally pulled a cord. So there we go. Hopefully we didn't lose anybody. But the Mazda 6-speed is really quite heavy, and that hampers handling and it hampers fuel economy in their models. So you'll really notice, for instance, if you are driving comparable vehicles, comparably equipped, comparable tire sizes, etc., back to back, you'll notice that the Mazdas tend to feel a little bit more front heavy than some of the competition, and that could get solved with that. In an irrational and idealized world, I would like the Honda 10-speed because I really like Honda's new 10-speed. I think that's been a great transmission. So let's move along here and find someone that is a little bit more recent. Thanks, Todd, for joining. So if anybody else wants to join, we'll shout you out here. Let's see here. Do we agree with Doug DeMuro that Infiniti will leave America? No, I don't agree with that at all. They have a lot of product coming. They just hired a whole bunch of people and shuffled people around. I don't think that Infiniti will leave America. I'm not sure where that rumor came from. No major outlet has really said that there's any validity to that rumor. Let's see here. Moving on. Does it make sense to buy EVs in this economy, or are EVs thrown back 5 to 7 years till we recover again? That's tricky, of course, because it depends on why you might want to buy an EV. If you're buying an EV for theoretical environmental reasons, then it doesn't really matter, the cost of gasoline. I would also argue that if you are buying a car for cost, quote unquote cost, then EVs aren't a good fit either. There's a lot of argument that EVs will save you money long term because they don't have maintenance, quote unquote, and they don't have this and they don't have that. The truth of the matter is EVs still have maintenance. It's different kinds of maintenance on a different schedule, but there's still maintenance involved. And we are starting to see the reality that some EVs may even need fluid changes. For instance, the new Model Y actually has fluid filters now that probably will have to get changed at some point. Anytime you have gears moving around, moving components inside a case with oil in it, it's going to need service at some point or another. Let's put it that way. But there's the acquisition cost of the vehicle that's the problem. So if you're replacing a car that gets 30 miles per gallon, you have to think to yourself, how long is it going to take to cover the entire cost of that new car versus just keeping the car that I have and maintaining it and keeping it on the road? That is a tricky one. I would not be surprised if car sales really took a deep dive, though, this calendar year, depending on exactly how the economy recovers, what efforts are done to try and resurrect the economy. Obviously, if there are, right now there are 30, I'm getting my numbers wrong, possibly 30 million Americans out of work right now. And if you are one of them, I'm pretty sure that buying a new car is the last thing on your list. And so if there was a method to stabilize their income and then hopefully everything recovers at some point, then it's more likely that you'll get car sales to recover quickly. But if that is not the case, and we just have 30 million Americans unemployed for a year, 2 years, 3 years, then it's not going to be pretty for really any business. So we'll see. Do you have an opinion on GM's camera trucks with the camera-based adaptive cruise control? Have we used it yet? That is an interesting question. It was my understanding. Oh, okay, there we go. Yeah. We haven't used the GM one. I was correct. They're single camera. So generally speaking, that the camera-based systems like that aren't going to work as well in adverse weather. So it'll be the same sort of difference between like Subaru EyeSight and some of the competitive systems out there. One of the reasons that GM has gone this route is basically the same reason that Ram went with the radar system behind the windscreen. And that is that if you are modifying the front end of your truck, which happens very frequently, people will put brush guards or different accessories, winches, etc. on the front. All those sorts of things can interfere with a traditional front bumper mounted radar system, like we see in the Ford trucks. So Ford trucks, you do have to be careful about how you modify that front end and how that will interact with the radar adaptive cruise control system. But the camera-based system would avoid that particular issue. It's just not going to be quite as reliable in some situations. If you can't see whatever, the camera can't see it either. So hopefully we will get one of those soon. I do think it's interesting that the last 2020 GM trucks that we got did not have that particular option. So moving along here. RX 350 versus Q5. Oh, that's an interesting question. I would probably Q5. When are we going to see news on the 2021 Sienna? I'm going to bet that that's going to be delayed. That's probably going to be towards the end of the year. If you are looking for a new minivan, I would say if you don't need it in the next 12 months, then you might be okay waiting for the Sienna. Most likely the Sienna is going to be pushed back. I would say possibly even to 2022. So the thing with Toyota is if we take a look at their previous release timings, it takes them a decent amount of time to get products out and about. So RAV4 and Highlander launch versus on sale date, they were announced, then 6 months later we drove them, then 3 to 4 months later you could buy them. So by the time we actually see a 2021 Sienna in picture form that is final production, then you would probably expect a 9 to 10 month lead time before you can actually buy one. So we see very long lead times from Toyota. It's not like some car companies where, you know, they're announced in January, in February we drive them, and by February they're for some reason already on sale. Toyota takes a much slower approach to that. So definitely keep an eye on that. Potato's asking, thoughts on the Ioniq's hybrid system? DCT with hybrid, will it have the same legendary reliability as Toyota Prius? Seems like a good option for those bored with eCVTs. That's an interesting question. So simple answer, no, it's not going to be as reliable as the Toyota Prius's hybrid system because there's simply more going on. So generally speaking, when we look at some of the reliability metrics that are available out there, they have been around long enough to get 3-year, 4-year metrics out. They have reliability that's generally on par with a traditional automatic or some of the other more reliable DCTs out there, which is to say generally reliable in the grand scheme of things, but not as reliable as the Prius because the Prius system is very, very simple. There's a lot less going on inside the Prius's drivetrain, and that just adds to the simplicity that we see in that whole system. But the DCT does have a particular feel to it, and if you are looking for something that feels like a traditional automatic, has that particular feel to it, you can shift yourself, offers engine braking in definite steps as you start decelerating, then the DCT is going to be a great option. And I wouldn't be overly concerned about reliability. In general terms, Hyundai and Kia have been excellent in reliability. They've been far above average, a semi-step below Toyota and Lexus in most rankings. So I would not be concerned at all long term, but just keep in mind it's not going to be as reliable as the Toyota system just based on overall design. Moving along here. What do you think that Fiat cars haven't been doing well? What would you do to fix them? Ooh, that's an interesting loaded question. I think Fiat has proven that Americans aren't really interested in small cars that aren't cheap. So Americans, you know, it just is the way that our auto industry has been set up, to be perfectly frank, for centuries. Smaller is less expensive. That's what we all think, right? So, you know, you look at a teeny tiny Mitsubishi Mirage and you say, well, gosh, that thing is so small, it should be $5,000. Why is it that a Mitsubishi Mirage is not that much less expensive than a Nissan Versa, which is several feet longer? And why is a Versa not necessarily that much less expensive than anything else that is double the size? And the reality is that it takes a lot of R&D effort to design a new car, and that effort does not really change substantially based on its size. And the cost of raw materials for a small car and a big car is not necessarily that much different. So, you know, building a Mercedes-Benz C-Class and a Mercedes-Benz E-Class, if they have the same engine under the hood, which they often do, the cost of construction is honestly about the same for those two vehicles. The cost of labor, the cost of the parts, etc., pretty similar. And so that's a problem for small cars. So that's what makes those big luxury cars quite profitable, because they can charge so much for them. Especially, you know, Mercedes sells relatively low volumes compared to Honda or Toyota, for instance, but they can make a lot of money because they're making such high volumes on those big Mercedes, for instance. But then if you scale that down and you look at a Yaris or a Rio or an Accent or a Fiesta, then we have the opposite problem. The margins are incredibly small, incredibly thin, and making the car small does not fix any of these problems. And it's difficult to make them more premium because then that's a cost problem. So I think there's part of it there. And then Fiat kind of tried to do something a little bit more premium in that space didn't necessarily work. They tried to focus on overt styling, and there's only so many ways you can retro things. America also didn't quite have the same nostalgia over old Fiats that they do in Europe as well. And then I also think that they made a few missteps in the drivetrain. The Fiat 500 was not speedy. It had a 5-speed, not a 6-speed manual. It took them a while to get some decent automatics in there. So it overall was not horribly surprising that went the way that it did. And I don't know if there's too much that Fiat could do directly to fix that problem without spending a lot of money. So we'll see what Fiat's future ends up being in America. I expect that there's going to be some corporate face saving, and they're going to keep some models here for a while. But what I don't know. I would be interested to see, personally, Fiat try and move over to some commercial vehicles. They have some great small vans and small panel things and transporters and small trucks, etc. In Europe. I would be really interested to see commercial vehicles out of Fiat, because I think that honestly those would be fitting a need that we seem to see in America that is not being serviced at the moment. That would be my thought there. Any major changes to the Volvo XC40 for 2021? The major change for the XC40 is going to be the availability of mild hybrids and hybrids depending on where you live in the world. So not everywhere is going to get them all at the same time. And of course the XC40 Recharge, the all-electric XC40. It's going to be their first all-electric vehicle. So that's going to really be all we see there. Let's see here. So Golnara, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name incorrectly here. Do manufacturers learn from their mistakes, Jatco, and improve design, fix issues? Do they usually know about real-world issues? So yes, they do. So there's a lot of hate on JD Power, for instance, and the way that they do their metrics. But this is a feedback cycle that is important to consider. So, for instance, JD Power buys or obtains customer lists from manufacturers. So they go to the manufacturer and they say, give me all of the data points, all the customer information for, the Toyota Corolla that you sold, all the Toyota Corollas you sold last year. Then they go back and they do their surveys with these owners. And then if the manufacturer wants that data, they can buy the data from JD Power. They're not controlling what's going on in the data. So a lot of people assume that this is somehow biasing JD Power. I don't buy into that at all. I think that's incorrect. But the manufacturers are able to buy this data and then use it to improve their product. So we see some manufacturers super focused on this feedback loop. For instance, the Hyundai Kia Motor Group, especially Kia, is really, really interested in this data because it's an easy way to get what they think is unfiltered feedback from consumers. So you buy the car, JD Power has asked you about the car, but it's not Kia. So they think that you're going to be more honest with JD Power on your feedback. So then they buy the data back from JD Power and they attempt to improve their product, and then it goes back through this feedback loop so they can attempt to improve reliability or improve functionality or improve the customer experience, whatever it is exactly that they're after as far as improvements go. So we definitely see manufacturers that do this. They all do it to some extent, with the exception of Tesla. But the varying degrees with which they do it changes based on the manufacturer that we're talking about. So exactly how much Nissan really pulls out of that, I don't know, but I'm sure that they are definitely getting some data out of there. Let's moving on here. Let's see, Subaru Outback versus CR-V hybrid, which has better acceleration? That would be the CR-V. I'm pretty sure. That's an interesting question. I'm trying to remember our numbers. The last time we had the Outback, it was the turbocharged Outback, which is the one they sent us, and the naturally aspirated Outback we drove at the launch event. The CR-V has more torque and a little bit more power. Overall curb weight is not too far off. They're pretty close together. But the electric motor is probably going to make the CR-V be a little bit better performing. I didn't find the CR-V hybrid noisy, but some people dislike the way that Honda's hybrid systems sound because there is a little bit of a disjointed style, a disjointed seeming nature between acceleration, engine speed, and throttle position. Just due to the overall design of the hybrid system, they're not always 100% in sync, and that tends to bother some people. Personally, I'm not bothered by it, but I know that some people are, so definitely keep that in mind. Let's put it that way. Let's see here. Do you think we'll see any WRX competition or entry-level sports sedans again sometime? It does not appear that there is much pressure on that. We are seeing a few mild performance options like the Forte GT. There's a rumor that we will have the Elantra N, or at least an N Sport, or whatever it is that they're calling that particular version of the Elantra. That's possible. We are getting an N-line Sonata, but it's not going to be a full-on performance model. It's just going to be Camry V6 kind of power output with a few more niceties on it and a bit more of a sporty drivetrain. So it's hard to tell. There are, however, rumors that the Hyundai Kia Motor Group may produce a more performance-oriented Kia model, but a lot of details are sketchy. We aren't sure on that. Joseph is asking, how do we feel about buying an extended warranty? Good idea or bad idea? That's an interesting question. I would say it really depends on the car and how much you love it and how much the reliability seems to be questionable. I bought an extended warranty once on a Volvo, and it was probably the best deal I ever did. That particular model had some reliability issues, but I loved the rest of the car, and so I was really willing to deal with that, and the extended warranty ended up being a good idea. Now, would I buy an extended warranty on a Toyota RAV4? No, I wouldn't bother, because it's just not going to be worth the money in all logic. Similar things I would say for most of the mainline reliable brands. I wouldn't buy the extended warranty on the average Hyundai or Kia or Honda or Toyota, etc. I wouldn't necessarily perhaps even buy the extended warranty on a mainstream version of an American car either. So if you're going to be buying a 5.3 liter V8 Silverado, I probably wouldn't buy the extended warranty on that. But if you're going to be buying, the one with all the bells and whistles and the off-road bits and everything, and you do plan on abusing it a bit more, then I might buy the extended warranty. If you're really going to be taking it off-road, if you're going to be towing a lot with it, then the extended warranty may make a bit more sense if that helps you out there. George is asking, how does JD Power get revenue? They charge manufacturers to advertise that they won. So, well, that's not quite true, actually. So they charge manufacturers to buy the data back, and they charge manufacturers if the manufacturer wants to advertise to license the award. So, and this is the tricky bit. So Consumer Reports get, awards, top pick awards, but they don't allow that same kind of advertising. If Consumer Reports decided tomorrow to license that and allow manufacturers to advertise those awards, it does not necessarily influence their data collection style. And one of the ways we know this is that JD Power's numbers and True Delta's numbers and Consumer Reports numbers and all the other reliability metrics that you see out there are largely the same. There really is no statistical variance between what JD Power says is going to be a reliable car and what Consumer Reports says is going to be a reliable car. And if Consumer Reports is not paid off in a lot of people's opinions, and JD Power is bought by big whatever, then you would expect to see a difference in these numbers, and it's just not the case. So there's really no evidence for that. And remember that the way that JD Power is computing their numbers, they're not always paid by the manufacturers for anything specific. It just depends on exactly the situation, if the manufacturer wants to advertise that or if they want the data back. So obviously they'll sell the data. So if General Motors wants to buy all of the reliability data from JD Power, it's available for sale. But does that mean that they're altering that data to make GM happy? It does not appear that that is the case. Let's put it that way. Why do diesels not usually make it in America? This is mainly a tax thing, to be perfectly honest. So remember that in Europe, diesel is often less expensive or on par with gasoline in terms of cost per liter. In the US, that's not the case. In the US, generally speaking, diesel is more expensive. So you've got more expensive fuel, you've got less available fuel because diesel is generally not as available as gasoline either. That's through a quirk in the way that we refine diesel based on consumer demand. So consumer demand is not as high, so consumer supply is not as high, availability is not as high, etc. Diesel engines also tend to be a little bit more expensive to manufacture. There are different tolerances, etc., involved in a diesel engine. Diesel engines tend to be a little bit heavier, so dynamically they can be a problem if you're after sportiness. Americans also have there have been periods in time in the US where diesels were more in and out of favor. The 80s, the 70s, for instance, diesel was a bit more in favor. But even then, it had this reputation for being the smelly, oily fuel. People didn't like to touch the diesel handle at the gas station, and now gas stations don't have the little glove you can put on anymore for you to fill up diesel. It's like I have diesel farm equipment at home, and I will admit that diesel is not exactly as easy to deal with sometimes as gasoline. When you pour it out of the gas can, it's thicker, so it continues to drip for a while, and you have to deal with the drips. There's definitely an oily residue hanging out, from the filler cap because if you're not careful, etc. People don't like that on their cars. So it's all of that goes into it. But I think really cost is the big reason. So the diesel engine's more expensive, the fuel is more expensive. Why do you bother? We do see high diesel take rates in vehicles that are designed for heavy duty applications, though. So obviously, Americans don't have a problem with diesel in trucks. They love diesels in trucks. They love diesels in big SUVs because there it seems to make more sense, but it's a functionality reason there. So you buy the diesel in the truck because you want the towing ability, you want the low-end torque, you want the different feel, etc. But in a rational world, a lot of those shoppers may still even be best served with the gasoline engine in the US. So it really just depends. And lastly, emissions are a bit of a problem. So getting a diesel engine to comply with the particulate emissions and nitrous oxide emissions that a gasoline engine can meet is tricky. And this is one of the reasons that we see some manufacturers out there, even in Europe, that are a bit more interested in emissions have moved away from diesels. So for instance, Volvo has been a very diesel-heavy company over the last 30, 40 years. But even Volvo has been moving pretty rapidly away from diesel in favor of gasoline and plug-in hybrid and electric vehicle production. So Michael's asking, do we think the RAV4 Prime will arrive on time? Absolutely not. It is probably going to be delayed, although they haven't really said. And again, remember that the RAV4 Prime was never going to be on sale before the end of the fall 2020. So we don't know if that's going to stay the case, fall/winter. So it could be anywhere in the September to December timeframe for the RAV4 Prime. We don't know if that's going to change. I would suspect that it will get pushed back, but I don't know when and by how much. Let's see here. Can you speak to the known reliability issues in the GLC 43 versus X3 versus Porsche Macan S? Owned for 8 years. So generally speaking, I would say from what we've seen, your more reliable bet's probably going to be the BMW X3. The ZF transmissions seem to be a little bit more reliable than some of the modern Mercedes designs. We don't know exactly what the Porsche reliability will be. When you look at Porsche reliability metrics, I would say that you have to keep in mind Porsche reliability metrics, metrics in general, don't account for miles driven. So when you look at Porsche metrics, the average Porsche does not get driven as many miles a year as the average Lexus, for instance, in the segment. So if you look at reliability per miles driven, on a lot of these studies where the Porsche ranks above Lexus, the reality is that on a per miles basis, it's going to be below. And it generally tends to be pretty European luxury car average, which is to say not as reliable as a lot of mainstream cars. So there's that. Let's see here. Have we noticed that some new cars are removing features like tire pressure readouts for all 4 tires, seeing that omission on some new cars? It's all a cost thing, so we definitely are seeing that here and there. but it's not too surprising because manufacturers are always looking to lower costs. It just is a fact of life in modern cars there. Let's see here. Have we heard anything on the next gen Infiniti platform? Actually, we've heard quite a lot. So, we know that Infiniti is going all electric over time. We don't know what that time period is. We know that it's going to be rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. We know that it's going to have the option of a range extender or not, and it's going to be a 3 or a 4-cylinder range extender that's going to be ultra quiet. I don't know how quiet that is. And we don't know when it's going to be. So there's a lot of future talk, but not a lot of substance. We were shown a number of sketches, the media, the whole collective we media, not the royal we. We don't know when they're going to be on sale though, and I think that's going to be the problem with Infiniti. Like, if these promises could happen in 2021, I think Infiniti could really have a winner, but if Infiniti is going to be dripping along with a lot of their current lineup for a while, I think that could be a little bit of a problem. Moving along here, will the next Ford Edge use CD6? We actually don't know what the next Ford Edge is going to be. No rumors on that one yet. Let's see here. What are your thoughts on why Nissan got rid of the Rogue Hybrid now that we've driven the RAV4 Hybrid and CR-V Hybrid? I think the big problem with the Rogue Hybrid was overall efficiency. I don't think it was right to drop it. The efficiency was a little bit better, but it was not enough better than the regular Rogue to really justify it. So the Rogue was already pretty efficient, generally speaking, which made that conversion a little bit tricky. In real-world driving, if you are gentle on it and you're doing a decent portion of highway, a Rogue non-hybrid could easily get you over 30 miles per gallon. Whereas the stepped automatic in the RAV4 isn't going to be quite there. So the difference between RAV4 hybrid and RAV4 non-hybrid is larger. They also don't have the volume, so it wasn't available on every trim like the RAV4 is. But fuel economy is the big thing there. I think it really would have had troubles, breaking through in a market where you've got a 40 mile per gallon RAV4 hybrid. That's really the big deal there. Let's see here. I wish I knew the price of the 2020 Hyundai Sonata hybrid. I agree with you. I wish we knew that price. You can bet that it's going to be pretty similar to the current one, though. And the reason we know that is because the Sonata stuck pretty close to its original price tag. So it's probably not going to be terribly different. Let's see here. Do we believe the American luxury car market is becoming oversaturated? That's kind of an interesting question. We don't see... we see luxury sales doing quite well, and since a lot of the focus has been on less expensive luxury, Mercedes' main model push lately has been filling out that bottom end of the line, and BMW as well. So we have a front-wheel drive sedan from BMW now. We have the X1 and the X2. On the Mercedes front, we have 4 entry-level vehicles. We have A, we have CLA, GLA, and GLB. So I think it makes a lot of sense. It is somewhat diluting the American classic vision of what luxury is. If you can go buy essentially a luxury Corolla from Lexus, well, that's probably not fair because the UX is sort of a little bit quasi Yaris-y. Anyway, tiny luxury vehicles. So if you can buy an inexpensive Lexus or a BMW or whatever, it does kind of dilute the value of the brand and the specialness. But on the other hand, it has increased margins. So I don't think that we're going to be seeing too much of a change there, because as long as the margins are good and they sell, then it will continue there. Let's see here. Any chance or rumor of seeing a Forester or Outback hybrid? I would not be surprised, Lazy-Eyed Monster, if we saw one. Now, the question is when and what is it going to be? That is the question. So we do know that they're using the same motors as the Camry hybrid, because Toyota does own a minority share in Subaru. I've seen some rumors about Toyota controlling Subaru. They don't control Subaru at all in that way. There are all these very strange ownership patterns in Japan, and some are controlling and some are not, and the one that we see with Subaru and Toyota is not a controlling share. Obviously there are shared interests, and we do see the writing on the wall that if Subaru were to go bankrupt, it probably would be Toyota that would be pushed into buying them. So we do see a lot of government pressure happening in Japan for this sort of thing. The rumor mill is that Nissan bought Mitsubishi not because they necessarily wanted Mitsubishi, but because it was the right thing to do within the government structure and geopolitical structure going on there in Japan. And we see that same sort of push now with Toyota and Mazda and Toyota and Subaru. So if either one of those were to go bankrupt, it's probably Toyota that would be sort of tapped on the shoulder to do the buyout and fix the problem. So it is in Toyota's best interest to make sure that Subaru does not go bankrupt, because they probably don't really want to own them. And that's part of why we see some of these licensing deals. Now, I think it's kind of an interesting arrangement, jamming the Camry's components into that longitudinal transmission there. We don't know how many they can build. We don't know a lot of the production details on that. And we also don't know whether the Subaru larger vehicle platform could handle a hybrid system or not, as far as battery pack positioning goes. And finally, we don't know what the fuel economy improvement would be. It's not great in the Crosstrek hybrid. So based on the weight and everything that we see in the Subaru product line, I would not be surprised if they hybridized and you didn't really see a fuel economy improvement. That could be a problem. So we'll see how that all goes down. Will the CX-3 be discontinued in America like in Europe? I would bet that it will be, but we just don't know exactly when. Someone's asking about the next generation Dodge Challenger. It's a long way off. Let's see here. How does fuel economy compensate for reliability? Heard mixed reviews saying they prefer reliability, blah, blah, blah. I mean, generally speaking, obviously if you're saving tens of thousands of dollars over the lifetime of the vehicle in fuel, then that's going to compensate for a lot of potential unreliability. I think the perfect example here is in the pickup truck segment. So if you were to buy one of the 3 efficient formats of the big 3 American pickup trucks, whether it's the Ram, the Ford, or the General Motors trucks, they all have a relatively efficient base engine that performs relatively well. And even the mid-level and upper-level engines are more efficient than the Nissan or Toyota engines. So if you were to buy insert your base engine here in any of those 3 trucks, and you get a slightly better discount on the hood. So you're going to pay a little bit less for the truck than a Tundra, and the Tundra is going to get you 13 to 14 miles per gallon. Their EPA ratings are quite low in the Tundra. The age of the engine, the age of the transmission, overall construction of the truck, just not terribly efficient. The average owner out there driving 15 to 20,000 miles a year should logically expect to save $10,000 minimum in fuel in those American trucks over the lifetime of their truck. And so the reality is, even if your engine dies, which is unlikely to happen because modern engines last well over 200,000 miles, but even if for some reason you were to have a problem with your engine or your transmission that required a rebuild or some sort of major repair, you are unlikely to see $10,000 of repairs in the first 10 years of ownership. It just doesn't happen really with any new car out there. I don't care what new car you're looking at. It could be an Alfa Romeo. It could be a Fiat. It could be a Land Rover. You are generally speaking unlikely to see $10,000 in repair difference cost between it and the quote-unquote reliable entry in the segment. And the only exceptions there could be some of the more luxury-oriented vehicles. But the difference is going to be in features that they don't have. So if you say, well, your Land Rover could experience 10 grand of repairs in its first 10 years, sure, but you would also see that same level of repair in a German option, possibly. You're not going to see $10,000 more in repairs or for your Land Rover than your BMW X5. You're not going to see $10,000 more for even a Land Cruiser, really, over that Land Rover. So that's something definitely to keep in mind. Moving on here, do we think Subaru might adopt something like Toyota's multi-stage hybrid system? It's already a longitudinal layout. I am interested to see if they do something along those lines. The primary reason for Toyota's multi-stage hybrid system in their more performance-oriented vehicles was the power. And we are going to be seeing those hybrid systems, now that they've been sort of tested within the Lexus envelope, that same general design seems to be going to be applied to their truck lineup. But I don't think that that is a good fit for Subaru, because Subaru is really a brand that is not focused on towing and not focused on overt performance outside of the WRX. So overall, I would say that those transmissions have a weight penalty that is not likely to be recouped. So instead, we are more likely to see the hybrid system that they already have in the Subaru be massaged into something else if they go in that direction, which I think logically we will. They spent a lot of R&D time and effort on that hybrid system. It's possible that one of Toyota's other hybrid systems, the previous generation one that we found in the GS and IS, could find some sort of home in another vehicle out there, but they would require heavy case modifications. The Subaru system is a longitudinal system that incorporates the front differential and the transfer case all into the same transmission casing. And so that is going to, it could be an impediment to design to try and modify something else when you already have that same basic design there. Moving on here. Should I wait for the 2021 Kia Stinger or get a 2020 now? Oh, that's interesting. I think any way you go, Tech Defender, there's going to be a good deal on that one because Kia's not selling a lot. I would say I might wait to see more about the 2021, and the moment the 2021 gets announced, just dive into those changes and then make your decision there. So I would say hold off for a bit. In a normal world, we may have already seen that, but now is not a normal world. See, someone here is asking, Palisade hybrid possible? I'm sure it's possible. Whether or not it was designed for it, we don't know. And whether or not Hyundai Kia has a hybrid system in development for that, we don't know. There has been a rumor that we may see a slightly more powerful hybrid system at some point from the Hyundai Kia Motor Group beyond the 1.6 liter turbo, but we don't know yet. I think that system may be a little bit too small, too underpowered for the larger vehicle. It's going to go into the Sorento, and there's a rumor that it may end up in the Santa Fe as well. Probably will end up in the Santa Fe, but we don't know exactly when. Tam is asking, when will we review the Lincoln Aviator? That is a question I have been asking myself as well, and I've also been asking Lincoln, and I have received very little response. So, who knows? Let's see here. What automobile company is likely to be most competitive with Tesla? I think GM and Chevrolet. I would argue that for Tesla, it's not going to be General Motors unless Cadillac hops in the game, and the big reason for that is that Tesla, like it or not, is largely considered a luxury brand, and I think true competition would be in the luxury window. A lot of people have assumed that Tesla has succeeded because of their green image, etc., and I don't think that is true. When we take a look at some of the data, especially cross-shop data and trade-in data, there is a significant green portion, of course. A lot of Prius people moved into there, but we also see a significant pull from luxury car sales. So the reason that I think that GM and specifically Chevrolet is not going to be a Tesla competitor at all is that we don't see any real GM trade-ins on Teslas. So the Tesla shopper is not cross-shopping GM. The Tesla shopper might cross-shop Cadillac, but they wouldn't cross-shop Chevy, let's put it that way. So if there was a full electric Cadillac, that could be a competitor, but I don't think that we are seeing any of those rumblings from the Chevy side. I think that in a logical world, if we see the plans continue on, the first direct competitor is probably going to be Polestar. And to some limited extent, perhaps the Mach-E. The Mach-E is the first thing that is Tesla-fied, I would argue, because up to this point, we have seen, the Model S came out, and then we saw a smattering of other EVs, but none of those other EVs were a large rear-wheel drive luxury car that was fast. Then we saw the Model X come out, and then we saw a smattering of EVs out there, from the e-tron to the Mercedes EQ models to the Volvo XC90 plug-in hybrid that some people thought was sort of a competitor. None of those are really competitors because none of those are three-row vehicles. If you want a three-row electric thing, a three-row thing that spends time in electric mode, let's put it that way, then you're kind of comparing the Tesla to a Chrysler minivan. And that's not the same thing either. So when the Jaguar I-Pace came out and it wasn't the same thing, that also didn't make a lot of sense. Then we saw the Model 3 come out, and nobody else had a performance vehicle that is similarly sized and shaped to the Model 3 either. So we saw a lot of people defect from 3 Series, from C-Class, from A4, from ATS, etc., over into the Tesla in that category. Just like we saw shoppers that were after the Model S come from E-Class 5 Series cars and go into the Model S. Very similar thing. So I would say Polestar has that possibility. Porsche is possible because, of course, they have full electric vehicles that are luxury branded vehicles. But I think the big push would be when Genesis, which seems to be perhaps ahead of some of the others, but certainly BMW and Mercedes and Audi, when they have more full-on EVs in volume production that are direct corollaries in the segment to Tesla, then we'll really see how that plays out. The Mustang Mach-E, which is not there, the Mustang Mach-E is going to be the first true competitor to the Model Y. So it is about the same size, it seats the same number of people, the range is approximately the same, we see the same dedication to performance, etc., but it's still not a luxury car. So that's going to be tricky there. And as a result, I can certainly see that a BMW X3 shopper might cross-shop a Model Y, but they might not cross-shop a Mustang Mach-E, if that makes sense. Remember that for a lot of luxury car shoppers, brand is incredibly important, and Tesla is certainly steeped in brand. And when you look at purchase reasons in some third-party metrics that I've seen, brand is an incredibly strong reason to buy a Tesla. A lot of people, well, let's put it this way, a large number of people are certainly buying a Tesla not necessarily because it's an EV, but because it's a fast luxury branded vehicle and it's flashy. So there's definitely that. Moving along here. Can you update us on the Mountain Garden channel? Oh, yep, you can head over to the Mountain Garden channel now, actually. You can check that out. There's a new video up there on a solar system. So we're actually going off-grid at home eventually over time. So due to the COVID-19 pandemic drama, there were some really great deals on all the solar components, and so we bought we bought 10.5 kilowatts of solar panels, which is a lot of solar panels. We bought 92 kilowatt hours of batteries, which is about almost a Tesla Model S in battery. That's a lot of battery. Bought all the inverters, etc., and that project has started already. We just put our first video out on that project. There'll also be a video on a new dump. I guess I don't know what you call it. It's technically called a mini track dumper. It's kind of like a itty bitty little dump truck, which is adorable. We got one of those to help us with this particular project. So you can head over to check those out. It's youtube.com/themountaingarden, and they're links somewhere. Most of the videos, they're links, and at the end of the videos, there's certainly links there. During this pandemic thing with all the sales shut down, we are definitely going to be focusing more on that channel, I think. Not that we'll be leaving Alex and Auto's, abandoning it or anything, but I'm obviously not traveling as much as normal, so all that extra travel time is being spent on the gardening channel, since views are up over there and they're definitely down over here. So let's see here. RAV4 2020 versus CRV 2020. We actually have a video on that, so I would suggest checking that video out because that's a pretty complicated topic there. Moving along here. What would be a better buy? RX 350, RX 450h, or Audi Q5? Oh, that's a tricky one. Better buy. I might go Q5. It depends on how much you want the hybrid, obviously. There's no hybrid Q5, so that's a tricky one. There's going to be a plug-in hybrid to Q5. I'm not sure if that's on sale yet, but it will be out very, very soon. Why are some non-luxury cars same price as mid-trim luxury cars? many people are looking for those features. So you're out there shopping for a car, and someone says, I'd like a Ford Explorer, or I'd like a this, or I'd like a that, but I really wish it had X. I wish it had ventilated seats, or this or that. There's a lot of crossover in pricing, which is definitely a problem there. And I think we're going to take a last question here. Let's pick a last question here. That's actually a good one here. So why do cars don't sell well even exist? There are a wide variety of reasons for cars that don't sell well to exist. Sometimes it's manufacturer pride. Sometimes they say, well, this is something we really wanted to do to show our technology prowess. So Toyota's Mirai, we're getting another Mirai, for instance. The next generation Clarity is definitely going to happen. I'm sure we don't know anything about it, but there's definitely going to be a third generation Clarity because Honda also is dedicated to hydrogen. We see the Nexo, for instance, from Hyundai. We see Toyota making Tundra pickup trucks, which is probably a waste of money for the manufacturer, to be perfectly honest. They make a truck that sells absolutely terribly in America and only in America. Because they want to compete. They think that one day they can make it happen. Or they see it as advertising, which is why Halo cars exist. So, Dodge had the Viper. We've had the Ford GT is never going to make money for Ford, but it's a Halo car that they can hang their hat on, and they can say, see, this is the thing that we can do. We see this out of pretty much every manufacturer, to be honest, out there, except for small car companies. It tends to only be small car companies that don't do this. For instance, arguably there is no crazy model in the Subaru lineup. There's no room, no budget for it at all. The only reason we see the Mazda MX-5 is because Fiat partnered with Mazda, so that doesn't even count. And the BRZ doesn't count in the Subaru lineup because Toyota helped pay for it too. We don't see any crazy models in the Volvo lineup because there's no budget for that in small car companies like that. Then we see luxury car companies that do have some crazy models, but that's because their brand is built on that. So BMW, Mercedes, Jaguar, etc. They're built on needing the sports car. But it's more of a business reason. And sometimes vehicles will sell well in their particular market. So, for instance, the Land Cruiser sells well around the world. It does not sell well in the US, generally speaking. But Land Cruiser sells relatively well for Toyota here and there. And it's old. It's very expensive. So it's much more likely to be profitable for them. We also see models like Kia's K900 that sells well in its domestic market and sells well in the Middle East and Saudi Arabia, etc. So it makes sense to have the model around. It doesn't cost much in that respect. If you are selling it in a market that has adopted a U.S. crash standards and U.S. lighting standards, etc., then it already is available. It's already set for American sales, essentially. So that's generally why we see that sort of thing. Or sometimes it's emissions. So, we see manufacturers like Honda selling the Clarity battery electric vehicle because they need the ZEV credits. We saw a very limited number of RAV4 electric vehicles once upon a time because they needed the ZEV credits, etc. And that's why we see most EVs out there. To be perfectly honest, ZEV credits are part of the way that Tesla functions as well, because Tesla makes an awful lot of money from selling their ZEV credits to everybody else. The harmonization of Tesla and Fiat Chrysler's ZEV credit deal is supposedly worth about €1 billion a year. 1 billion. It's about 300 something million euros a quarter. So when you look at Tesla's financials, they would have been bankrupt a long time ago if they had no credits to sell. So that's also a factor in there. Well, with all of that out of the way, I will urge you all to have a great weekend. Stay safe, care for one another, all that good sort of stuff. And if you are not sheltering in place, be especially safe out there. And if you are sheltering in place, hey, check out all of the other videos on the channel. I will see all of you next week.